Hello and welcome to Future Squared. Stephen Hawking once said that intelligence is the ability to adapt to change, so let's adapt. My name is Steve Goveski, and each week I'll bring you conversations with preeminent thought leaders from a variety of fields to help you think in a multidisciplinary way, keep goals in your professional and personal life, and better navigate what is fast becoming a brave, new world. Future Squared is brought to you by Collective Campus, an innovation accelerator that works with organizations to unlock their people's latent potential to create more impact for humanity and lead more fulfilling lives. If you need help driving your organization's innovation strategy, visit collectivecampus.io. And without further ado,
come with me if you want to live.
Unless I absolutely need an answer right now, I should not be making things urgent that simply are not urgent. Most things do not need immediate answers. Of course, in a crisis, you need an immediate answer and whatever. But the problem with meetings is that you're asking people in real time about stuff that they don't have to get back to you on immediately. In fact, if you just asked them and they got back to you tomorrow, that would be fine. And so that's how we do it. We slow things down, let people answer on their own time and their own pace. And that way we're not pulling people off their work. So more people can get into a great flow state and then get back to you when they're ready to, versus when you pull them off their work because you want to get an answer from them.
welcome back to Future Squared for episode number 296 with Jason Fried. Jason thinks deeply about collaboration, productivity, and the nature of work. He's the co-founder of project management platform Basecamp. Founded in 1999, Basecamp has been recognized by Forbes as one of America's best small businesses. His 2010 TED Talk on why work doesn't happen at work has been viewed over 5 million times. He's also the co-author of Rework, which is about new ways to conceptualize working and creating, as well as the brand new It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work, in which he rejects the prevailing notion that long hours, aggressive hustle, and whatever it takes are required to run a successful business today. The Economist called the book funny, well-written, and iconoclastic, and by far the best thing on management published this year. As somebody who shares many of Jason's philosophies on work, I really enjoyed this conversation. Organizations are projected to invest over $2 trillion into digital transformation by 2022 to make them more efficient. But they could reap what I would argue are vastly greater rewards, not only in terms of productivity, but in terms of employee wellness, if they just changed the way they work today. Jason and I unpacked many lessons on productivity from his book, including 1. Why is everybody so busy? 2. Why more people doesn't mean faster or better outcomes? And 3. A handful of simple changes that you can make today to radically increase your productivity and enjoyment of work and life. With that, I bring you the one and only Jason Fried. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Thanks for having me on.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and you're joining me all the way from sunny Chicago, Illinois.
It is sunny today, which is unusual.
Man, whenever I think Chicago, I think back to the 1992-93 NBA season, Jason. For whatever reason, I decided to follow the Phoenix Suns, and I've been suffering ever since the Bulls beat us that year, 4-2 in the finals. Absolutely heartbroken. I was 9 years old at the time, and I still remember crying on my bed and my sister making fun of me. So thank you very much.
We kicked a lot of ass in that era, and we're paying for it now because we suck. So
yeah, well,
it happens.
Good. Jason, so you and your CTO at Basecamp, David Heimer's new book, It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work, came out last month. And I know you've called this book the spiritual follow-up to your first book, Recode, from 2010. But firstly, man, congratulations on the book. The Economist has called it the best thing on management published this year.
Thank you. We're really proud of it, really happy with it. And we think it's a really important, timely message. Everything's getting crazier and crazier at work these days. And we want to push back hard against that.
Mm-hmm. And that's one thing you call out in chapter 1 of your book, where you say people often say that it's crazy at work, so crazy. It doesn't matter who you speak to. It's as if the default response is, I'm just so crazy, so busy right now. But why so crazy?
Oh man, there's so many reasons these days. Technology has made work worse, not better. More and more people are distracted by more and more things all the time, whether it's personal social stuff or business chat and instant messaging and all these things where people can just go and chip away at your time and your attention constantly. And there's this sort of expectation of immediate response. If someone sends you a message, you feel like you got to get back to them right away, which takes you off your game and whatever else you're working on. So that's one thing. Another thing is sort of the chasing of growth, endless growth at all costs, that we must continue to grow our companies as fast as we possibly can. Well, that leads to people having to put in ridiculous hours, 60, 70, 80-hour weeks, nonstop work on the weekends as well, and the expectation that you can be available for the company whenever because you believe in, quote, the mission. And all these problems, I think, all these things that add up to problems and actually ultimately cause people to feel like it's crazy at work and they're busy all the time, yet they still have no time to do what they need to do. It's just a constant mess. It's really unfortunate.
And you mentioned there that people are pouring 60, 70 hours of work a week into their work. So, I mean, how many of these hours are actually spent on the work, though?
I don't think very many. And that's kind of the problem. I think a lot of people are spending time being busy, not necessarily sort of on their own whim either. I think a number of people are pulled into too many meetings, too many discussions that don't really involve them, but they're required to be there. Too many interruptions all day long, people asking questions that they could figure out for themselves. And so people are sort of spread too thin. And while they're busy all day long, they look at their watch at 4 or 5 o'clock, and they're like, wow, where'd the day go? I got nothing done today, even though I was busy all day. And so you wouldn't have that feeling if you were actually doing the work. If you were doing the work, you'd feel like by the end of the day, you're like, wow, that was a great day's work. I got a ton of stuff done. I made a lot of progress. So I think the problem is when you feel like you're busy and you have no time, but you're not making progress. And that's all too common these days. And I think it's really unfortunate and unsustainable.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, it almost feels as if it's become a bit of a badge of honor as well for people to just proclaim proudly that they're so busy that they can't get through their workload. It
has. So there's a few things that people are so proud of, unfortunately. There's that. Just being busy is something people are proud of. Another thing is that people don't get enough sleep. They're proud of the fact that they're sleep deprived, which is just a horrible thing in all realms of life, work, health, temperament, all these things. And then, it's long hours and not enough sleep, and people are bragging about that constantly. And it's just really unfortunate. And I think, again, that, at the end of the day, we're all humans, and you cannot fight nature. Nature will always win. And we're animals. We cannot go without sleep. We cannot go without rest. We actually don't even do very good work if we're tired. People talk about pushing, 20, or I'd say like 12-hour days or whatever. You're not going to be really very good for 12 hours. You might get a few good hours in. So, why would you put your time into things when you're not at your, best effort? So that's something I don't understand as well, is this obsession with hours when really you only probably have a few good hours a day anyway to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the conventional wisdom around getting into flow and deep work suggests that you can perhaps only do about 4 to 5 hours max of in the zone kind of work where you're just churning out really high quality work and free of any interruptions. Yeah,
I mean, that's been my experience as well. I think, while I work an 8-hour day, there's probably half of it where I feel like I'm really into it, really getting into something. And the other half I spend, it's not really half and half, but I spend on other tasks that are not deep work tasks. They're just administrative things or things I have to check in on and that sort of thing. But if you don't get a good 4 hours to yourself really a day, and hopefully contiguous time, although I know it's really hard for a lot of people, but if you don't get that time, you're just putting more hours in isn't going to make up for the fact that you don't have those hours. You need to have the good hours, the good flow hours, in order to really get a good amount of really good productive work done where you can make forward progress on something.
Yeah. And I remember reading a report from McKinsey, which was around executives and how much time they spend in flow. And they actually found that people that spend time in flow are up to 500% or 5 times more productive than when they're just engaged in shallow level tasks.
It doesn't surprise me. Seems like it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I find that myself as well. And one thing you mentioned there, Jason, people are proud of being busy and also proud of not getting enough sleep. And it reminded me of a conversation I had about a year ago with Brad Feld on this podcast, the preeminent, I guess, venture capitalist. And he was saying that he had battles with depression because every day he'd have his alarm clock on at 5 a.m. and he'd get like 6 hours sleep, if that. But one of the biggest fundamental shifts he made in his life was to just wake up when he wakes up, when his body tells him, okay, you've had enough rest. And that's made a world of difference for him. So this whole notion of using a lack of sleep as a badge of honor is actually quite dangerous as well.
It's extremely dangerous. And there's a book I'd recommend everybody read who's curious about this called Why We Sleep. Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful book that goes into the science. It's very well written, but also really easy to read, even though it goes deep into some of the science. It's fascinating. And there's nothing more important for your body really actually than sleep. People talk about exercise. Exercise is of course very important, but you can get away without exercising for a little bit. You cannot get away with not sleeping very much. You will fall apart in a variety of different ways, and you're probably going to be the last to know because everyone else around you will be like, wow, this guy's really being annoying. Like, what's his problem? And why is he so short-tempered? And why isn't he able to perform? You might think that you're doing fine, but everyone else knows that you're not. But it affects every single system in your body, and it affects everybody around you. And it's really, really dangerous. And that book really goes into detail, and I highly recommend checking it out if you're curious at all about it. And also, if you think that you're getting enough, you're like, I get 6 hours, that's plenty, because my body only needs 6 hours. Like, you're lying to yourself. It's not true. You need to really read up on this. It's very serious. And everyone's so concerned about improving their performance. Like, the best way to do it is just to get an extra hour of sleep if you can. I've got 2 young kids at home, so sleep is harder for me, but I just go to sleep earlier. I'm at sleep. I'm going to sleep now at like 8:30 at night, which is early. But you know what? I need the rest. And if I have to get up at 5:30 in the morning, I have to go to bed early. And if I don't, I'm just going to be a wreck and a mess the next day, and not in tune for everybody else I have to work with. So I highly recommend checking it out.
Yeah, we'll add that book to the show notes for our listeners. And I think in that book there, it says something along the lines of not being able to pay off a sleep debt overnight. And that, say, if you sleep 5 hours a night during the week, you can't just have a big sleep on your Saturday night. You actually have to pay that off progressively over a number of days.
That plus the fact that you can never actually fully pay it off. So if you lose sleep, you can never regain that sleep. You can pay off, not really pay, actually you can never pay it off. But what you can do is you can build up some more sleep debt in a sense, or sleep credit, I guess you would say. But you cannot pay off that debt. Once it's gone, it's gone. And it's really serious. So, yeah.
Yeah. And people ultimately don't know what they don't know, right? I mean, you mentioned that there you might think you're doing okay. And it could be related to sleep. It could be related to nutrition, to exercise. People tend to normalize how they feel and they think they're doing okay. But the reality is if they actually worked on, the trilogy, if you will, of sleep, nutrition, and exercise, they would feel and perform much better. Not only perform better at work, but also become much more grounded people who aren't snapping at everybody every minute of the day.
So true. And I fall into the trap sometimes because if my kid gets up early, like I just don't get enough sleep. And I've tuned myself or trained myself to notice these things about myself that I know my temper is going to be a little bit tight that day, or short, I should say. And so I kind of keep an eye on that. So I'm just thinking about it, more mindful about if I'm snappy for whatever reason. Like I got to remember that there's a good likelihood or a good chance that I will be a little bit more difficult today to work with. So just being self-aware and understanding that it's going to affect you. You cannot not be affected by this. You cannot power through it. You cannot be some superhuman. You cannot take some sort of supplement. None of that stuff matters if you don't get enough sleep.
Yeah. And on being self-aware, I mean, you've been building Basecamp now for about 19 odd years. I mean, I imagine as a leader of an organization, you've had to work on becoming more self-aware during your journey with Basecamp.
Yeah, I mean, it's a constant journey, or constant challenge to be, I guess, more self-aware everywhere in your life, relationships, work, business, whatever it might be. And I think, part of it is getting older. You start to pay more attention. Hopefully you start to pay more attention to what you're really like and what really moves you and what doesn't, the whole thing. So I've had to work on it for sure. And I'm still working on it, and we'll always continue to have to be working on it. I think it's a good practice for everybody to pay attention to those things.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And going back to the notion of what's happening in the modern organization today, you've said that there is a trend of over collaboration in the workplace. Now, everybody likes to say that collaboration is a good thing, but having too many people on the bus can ultimately add a lot of complexity and slow down a project significantly. I think there's research out there. There's in fact a law called Brooks Law, which suggests that adding resources to a late software project makes it later. It doesn't speed things up at all. So why is this trend manifesting itself in today's organization, and how much of that do you think has to do with the fact that people like to perhaps outsource blame in certain types of organizations rather than take ownership?
Good questions. I'm not entirely sure why there's this trend of over collaboration. I do think there is, certainly. As far as where it started, I'm not entirely sure, other than sort of this idyllic notion that, more heads are better, like 2 heads are better than 1. So like that would mean that 10 are better than 2, probably, is what people would think. But I don't think that that's true. I think what ends up happening is once you go past 3 or so people on something, you need middle layers of management typically to monitor or to sort of manage the group of people, which means that communication ends up being a bit more muddled. People aren't talking directly to one another anymore, and they're going through a medium or a moderator of some sort, and that blurs the lines and whatnot. So I just think smaller teams in most cases are better. They make better decisions. I think that they don't second guess as often either. I think sometimes, when you're in a large group of people collaborating on something, there's a lot of second guessing because there's a lot of different opinions, and everyone wants their opinion to be considered, and everyone wants to consider everyone else's opinion. But at some point, the large team does itself in. And but I also think part of it too is that companies are larger and they're growing, especially in the tech world. There are a lot of companies that have, I think, too many people, frankly, way too many people. But when you have a lot of people, you have a lot of different departments, a lot of different siloed skills and specialists. And so you would tend to pull those people into meetings because you need that one specialty, and that one specialty versus like having a generalist who might understand a few things. So you might have been able to have one person represent 3 or 4 people before, but now you actually have 4 separate people doing those jobs. So you pull them all into the meeting, everyone's collaborating, too many people, and I think it slows things down. And like you said, adding more resources to a project typically doesn't make it speed up. It often slows it down, just because more people involved slow anything down, like anything that we know of, except for brute force things. Like if you're trying to build a wall or something, or build a building, or build a whatever, like having more people physically moving bricks, that's of course going to speed things up. But a lot of projects aren't that way. In fact, too many people get involved and it slows things down.
Yeah, and it's funny. I mean, in a past life, going back about 6 years now, I spent some time at an investment bank in Australia, and that was in the risk management capacity. And we would have these meetings where you'd literally have about 14 people sitting around the table for 3 hours, each going around the table one by one, sharing what piece of work they'd be executing on during this project. And the rest of the time, you're literally just sitting there looking at your phone, looking at your email, staring off into space, and it just wasn't being challenged. And I challenged this notion and took it to the person who facilitated the meeting and said, hey, do we really need to have everybody there for the entire 3 hours? And the response was, well, it's just a necessary evil. And I just feel like in a lot of organizations, particularly your large corporate organizations, the status quo just is not challenged.
Yeah, it's not. It's hard. Like, it's hard to challenge status quo, of course. And if you don't have the power to make the change, it's unlikely someone's going to listen to you, because the rules that are in place are the same rules that put the people who are in power in place. So why would they want to change the rules? Like, why would they want to mix? So it's hard, and this is true in politics, it's true in business, it's true personally, it's true in teams, it's true in all sorts of places. So I don't envy organizations that are stuck in a rut in that way. And I also don't envy people who are in a position where they know it's frustrating and terrible, but they can't make the change. I think it's really difficult spot to be in. And I do sympathize with those people and empathize with them too. It's tough. It's tough to push a huge rock up the hill when you can't do it alone. Yeah,
definitely. Something I definitely empathize with. So with respect to that notion, because I imagine a large part of this would come back to getting quality people on the bus, because in certain organizations, if you haven't made the effort in recruiting the right people, then you're going to find people who actually like to spend time in meetings because it means they spend less time actually working, or people who perhaps want to spend 14 hours a day at work because it means that they can then hide away behind the veil of work to avoid confronting themselves in the real world and having to develop themselves as full people. I mean, what are your thoughts on people that just use work as an escape / as an escape from, and meetings as an escape from work in general?
Well, I think, some people have meetings or call meetings because they're managers and they feel like that's the only way to manage is to get a bunch of people in a room and go around the table and ask questions, That's one way to do it. I think that that's really actually quite inefficient. People think it's efficient because you have 8 people in a room and you can ask them all a question over an hour and you get a lot of quick answers. But I think that 1 hour meeting is not a 1 hour meeting. It's an 8 hour meeting. You pulled 8 people in for 1 hour. That's 8 hours. Mm-hmm. So if you think about what you traded, it's usually not worth the trade. That's a lot of time that could have been spent elsewhere. So some people, though, like to be in meetings because, they don't have to actively do the work. Others call meetings because they think that that's their job, is to meet and discuss. So there's different motivations for it. I think at the end of the day, if your company is paying attention to whether or not actual forward progress is being made and work is getting done, it's pretty easy to tell who's not doing that and who's ducking and hiding. But again, some people, that is their job, is to call meetings, and managers often are those folks. And so it's really frustrating because you get this divide between people who have to do the work and people who are calling meetings, and oftentimes the schedules are different and the motivations are different. And so people who are trying to get their work done are constantly being pulled off of the work by people who don't have to do the other kind of work. So they don't realize how disruptive it is to keep calling meetings all day. So it's tricky. It's a tricky balance between communication, collaboration, individual contributions, management, all these things. So you just got to kind of find the right way. The way we do it at Basecamp is we don't really have meetings. What we have is basically asynchronous conversations using Basecamp, the product, where someone will post a message. For example, if I wanted to ask 8 people their thoughts on something, I would post a message in Basecamp. I'd write it up in long form, like in detail, present it, put it in Basecamp, and over the next day or so, I'd get responses from people on their own schedule, at their own time, and at their own pace. Because unless I absolutely need an answer right now, I should not be making things urgent that simply are not urgent. Most things do not need immediate answers. Of course, in a crisis, you need an immediate answer and whatever. But the problem with meetings is that you're asking people in real time about stuff that they don't have to get back to you on immediately. In fact, if you just asked them and they got back to you tomorrow, that would be fine. And so that's how we do it. We slow things down, let people answer on their own time and their own pace. And that way we're not pulling people off their work. So more people can get into a great flow state and then get back to you when they're ready to, versus when you pull them off their work because you want to get an answer from them.
Yeah,
very different approach.
Definitely, and I've seen organizations use that, whether they're using Basecamp or whether they're just using even email or Slack, because really it's up to you whether or not you want to check email every 5 minutes or maybe twice a day, and that way you're responding to those demands on your time at a time that suits you. And if it is something that is super urgent, hopefully, I mean, that's the relationship people should have with their email. But the reality in most organizations is that they do check email every 5 minutes, and it just absolutely annihilates any possibility of them getting into deep work.
Totally. But part of the problem there is the expectation. So if the organization expects people, the organization doesn't, but the people inside the organization, if the management, if they expect people to get back to each other very rapidly, no matter whenever anyone asks for anything, then of course you're going to feel like you need to be checking your email every 5 minutes or your chat every 5 minutes or all the time, because the expectation is of immediate response. So it's more of a cultural thing. At Basecamp, we don't expect anyone to get back to anybody immediately. In fact, I'd rather you wait to get back to me, unless, of course, it's a true emergency, and then I'll make that clear, like, hey, there's something going on, I need to hear from you, or I'd contact you in a different way via phone, perhaps, instead. But if the organization expects and demands immediate response, no matter what it is, when anyone asks anyone for anything, you're going to run into the situation where people feel like they have no choice but to constantly be tethered to email or whatever communication platform they use, and it's very unhealthy. And you're right, they can't get into a flow state. If you can't get into that, you end up working longer hours and less effective hours, and you end up probably pushing your life aside to get more work done. It's not a sustainable path over time.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It comes down to expectations. And I remember reading the 4-Hour Workweek back in 2008, just when it came out, and I was working at Ernst & Young at the time in a consulting role. And Tim talks about this notion of Well, it's setting an auto response to say that only check email, say twice a day at these hours. So if you don't hear from me, it's because of this reason. And I raised this with a partner and said, hey, do you think this is something that would fly for us? And you could probably guess what the answer was. I mean, absolutely not. You know, we've got to be responsive. If our client sends us a question, we need to snap back straight away. Otherwise, they're probably going to go down the road and work with PwC or KPMG, right? So it was that fear factor that just kept people into working with these entrenched ways of work, I suppose.
Yeah, and like I get it, I get all that, but the thing is, like, to what end? You know, like if you're saying like we need to get back to clients instantly, no matter what time it is, otherwise they're going to leave, then basically they own you 24/7. If they own you 24/7, they're number one, not paying you enough anyway to own you 24/7. Second of all, no one should ever own you 24/7. Third of all, sometimes you just think that they expect an immediate response. Exactly. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're reasonable people. And if they write you at 10 o'clock at night and you don't get back to them at 8 in the morning, they might be totally fine with that, as they should be, by the way. And if in the next morning you get back to them and go, hey, why? And they said, why didn't you get back to me last night? You said, because I was sleeping or because I'm with my family. Like, you need to establish boundaries. There's nothing wrong with that. And if someone doesn't respect your boundaries, then they're not the right client to work with anyway, flat out. Yeah. You cannot work with somebody who expects and demands everything from you on demand anytime you want. Like, you are not Netflix. You cannot be pulled in on demand and watch any show you want. That's just not how it works with human beings. So I think at some point you got to say that's not the right client for us. But also, I wouldn't assume right off the bat that every client demands an immediate response. I think that's another fallacy that a lot of client services firms get stuck in.
Oh, yeah, and couldn't agree more on that. And I do think it's probably a reflection of something deeper around a fear of incompetence or something to that effect. I mean, if you're 100% confident in your abilities, that you're creating value for this organization, that you've developed a good relationship with the client, then you shouldn't be scared about them running off to your competitor because you didn't respond within 10 minutes of them sending an email.
Totally agree.
So, Jason, I mean, well, let's talk about Basecamp. I mean, you guys have been recognized as one of America's best small companies by Forbes, with, as of May of last year, $25 million US dollars in revenue, just over 52 staff. You guys are based in Chicago, not in Silicon Valley, with staff in 30 different towns around the world. Now, earlier in our conversation, you were saying that a big part of the reason why organizations are struggling and why people are so busy is because they're chasing massive growth. You've preferred to grow consistently and profitably with just 5% a year-on-year growth. So you can enjoy the culture of a small business. I'd love to unpack that a little bit more.
Sure. So I'll also say that all the numbers you cited are like, those are assumptions because we don't publish our official numbers or anything like that. So I just want to kind of make that clear.
Yep, of course.
Our feeling is that, like, I think every company ought to find their right size. This is something you don't hear a lot about in business because business typically is grow. I just feel like there's a right size for everything in life. There's a right size for the amount of dinner you should eat every night. There's a right size for the amount of exercise you should probably do. Like, you wouldn't say that you should just exercise 9 hours a day. Like, that's just like not reasonable. And everyone would know that's not good for you. So why is it that businesses should just grow as hard and fast as they possibly can? I just don't buy it. So what we've basically settled into now, we have 55 people at the company today. Or 54, we're about to be 55. That's kind of our right size. We're actually not hiring anymore after this particular role. In fact, we weren't hiring before, but somebody left, so we're filling the role. But we're basically like, this is the right size of our company. As far as growth goes, we'll just grow naturally and carefully and thoughtfully versus trying to do the hockey stick, exponential growth. Because that would put too much strain on our culture. It would require us to hire a lot more people really quickly, which we don't want to do. It would mean that we'd have to have a lot more than 55 people, which we also don't want to do. And we'd have an imbalance. We'd have people who've been here for a long time, and then but we'd quickly be overrun by brand new people. And I think that would damage the culture in a sense, because I think cultures are better when there's a gradient, when there's a good number of people have been around for a while and basically an equal number of new people. But if we just started hiring, we'd always be new people. And I think that's really difficult for any team to deal with. And ultimately, this is about the self-awareness point. We're going to go back to that, which is we just know what we want. And David and I, we're the two owners, we just want a company around this size. We've got over 100,000 customers that pay us every month for our products. It's a wonderful business, very profitable. We're in Chicago. That's where we're headquarters. But like you said, there's people in 30 different cities around the world. We just want to do things our own way. We don't want to follow anyone else's definition of success or what we should be doing. We are, by all measures, extremely happy with how the business is going and successful and all the things you want to say. And we've also just found like this is enough for us. This is what we want to do. And we'll still grow a little bit. We grow a little bit here and there, right? We're not going backwards or anything like that. But like, even if we stood still, like that'd be fine too. Like, it's okay. All these things are okay. I think it would not be okay if we started falling backwards and started to, lose customers and that whole thing. Like that wouldn't probably be okay. But technically, like maybe it would be okay. Maybe it'd be okay too if we were a smaller company. Maybe that would be fine. Maybe we'd settle into a different thing where instead of having 100,000 customers, maybe we end up having 80,000. We're trending towards having more than we have now. But like, I'm just being hypothetical. Like, what if we lost 20% of our customers? Like, we might still be okay then too. It's just got to figure out what would actually like. If the only way you're satisfied is constantly pursuing endless growth, like at some point you're going to be very, very unsatisfied because companies do not grow at that rate forever. Yeah. We want to be in business for a long time. We've been in business for 20 years. We'd like to be in business another 10, 20, whatever it might be. And so we have to come up with a sustainable model that we can see ourselves getting there. If we felt like we had to continually double every year or two, like we wouldn't be happy. We wouldn't get there. We wouldn't want to be where we got or where we get to or where we end up. So I've thrown a lot of things in there, but basically it's self-awareness, getting a sense of what you think is enough, what you think is the right size, being honest with yourself about that, and not measuring up to what the industry wants out of you or what people expect. Or if people go, you only have 55 people, oh, you're small. Like, yeah, good. We are small, and I'm proud of that.
Yeah. And I think that last point around not following societies or say the startup ecosystem's definitions of success is such a big, profound point. I mean, you can take that and trace it back to, Aristotle and Socrates and Seneca and philosophers from 2,000 years ago who used to say things like, if you shape your life according to nature, you'll never be poor. But if you shape it according to people's opinions, you'll never be rich. And I mean, you've built an organization which is, like you said, very profitable. You enjoy working there. You've got a team of 55 almost around the world. You guys are growing year on year. It's easy to be happy with that, but society's conventions will say, well, you guys should be $100 million company or a unicorn. And I know Basecamp has repeatedly turned down more than, from what I have gathered, over 100 investment offers from venture capitalists and private equity firms, which again flies in the face of that sort of convention when it comes to technology companies just raising more capital. Let's go for Series D, E, F, G, and become a unicorn. Whereas you guys have kind of realized, hey, we're quite happy where we are. And I think that's such a departure from what we see on Mashable and TechCrunch most days.
Not only that, not only are we happy, but we would actively be unhappy if we were chasing those other milestones, let's say, chasing investment. We'd be doing things for other people rather than doing them for ourselves. And frankly, you'd be doing things for other people, not just other people, but you'd be out there making billionaires richer. And that's to me, not that interesting. I just think we know who we are. We've settled into what we want to do, and we're doing it our own way. And we have no one to answer to but ourselves and our customers. And, frankly, I think true independence is highly underrated. A lot of people, it's weird too, because people are entrepreneurial who go and start businesses, and they do it because they want to build their own thing. But pretty quickly, if you start taking money from other people, you're not building your own thing anymore. You're building their thing. And in fact, what you're building is a financial vehicle for them to generate a return. You're not really building a company anymore. You're building a financial vehicle. I don't want to do that. I want to build a company that's, of course, pays us well and pays our employees well. But the primary thing is not to cash out on it. That's not what we're building. And I think a lot of people end up working for and building financial instruments versus companies that make something they're really proud of.
Yeah, and
I'll tell you what, I know how to juice our numbers. Like, if I want to juice our numbers, I could juice our numbers. I could hire a bunch of people and do a lot of top line growth and hire a bunch of huge sales force and be really aggressive. And of course, we could grow our numbers, and we can, of course, grow our valuation, and of course, do all those things, right? If I wanted to play that game, that's not a hard game to actually play if you have a decent business. But I just don't want to play that game because I don't want to be a participant in the outcome. I don't want to lose my business because someone else found that the return is ready for them to cash in on. Therefore, my business is now a financial instrument, which they want to get out of, which means someone else has to get into, or I have to go IPO, then I have to answer the public markets. Like, I just don't want any of that. I don't want that hassle in my life. It's not what I'm interested in.
Yeah. And we say so many startup founders today conflate raising capital, particularly your early stage startups, conflate raising capital with having made it, when really that's just a bet that a venture capitalist has made on your business, hoping that it's one of the 10 investments that they'll make that will actually deliver the returns to cover all the losses.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's actually 1 out of 100 almost, right? That make it. So yeah, you're just a bet. You are a bet. I don't want my business to be someone else's bet. I'd prefer it to be my bet. Like, ultimately it is, of course, a bet. Like, and most businesses do fail. Most of them don't make it. And that's just the way that is. But I kind of want to live or die on that, not on an investor's decision for when they think my company is ready for them to leave it. You know, and that's just a weird situation. I think it's not what I want to do. And I'm on the board of a couple of companies who've raised money. Like, I get it. It's just a different perspective. And I'm not out there to say that what I'm saying on this podcast is what everyone should do. Yeah. I'm simply talking about, like, ultimately self-awareness, which is recognizing what do you want for yourself, and recognizing that there are other alternatives. Because if you just read TechCrunch and Mashable and these other sites, you think the only way forward is to go raise a bunch of money. That's all those sites cover. There are lots of alternatives for how to run a business, how to fund a business. And I just want to be one of those alternatives that people are aware of at the very least. But at the end of the day, people have to decide for themselves what makes sense.
Yeah, it just comes back to asking that question, like, why am I doing this? And really being objective about the answer.
Yes, agreed.
So, Jason, we've covered off on a few of the characteristics that underpin what you call a calm company, such as, relatively manageable growth, moving at a comfortable pace. You rarely have meetings. You work from anywhere. You have realistic deadlines. I mean, what are some of the other attributes that underpin what a calm company is?
I think a big part of it are reasonable deadlines, which a lot of companies don't have. They'll have a deadline for something, and as they approach the deadline, the amount of work they're asked to do increases. And so people pile in more stuff at the end, and that's just completely unreasonable and leads to a tremendous amount of stress, late nights, all-nighters, whatever it is, to make the deadline, even though you probably won't anyway, and it'll get extended. So at Basecamp, we're always trying to make sure that we narrow as we go. So the further along we are in something, the less there should be to do. And that's probably true after like a week or two into something, because the first week or two you're ramping up, but after that, like, you need to be doing fewer things towards your goal versus adding more and more stuff in there, because you'll always have more ideas. There are always more things to do, and if you just keep adding it on and layering it on top, like, you're going to make a lot of things very, very difficult on your team. So I think that's a key thing. The other thing is that our benefits at Basecamp are designed for people to enjoy outside of work. A number of companies in our industry design benefits to keep people at the office longer.
Yeah.
So, for example, they might have free dinners at the office. Well, that's not really about a free dinner. That's about, like, stay late. Why don't you? At Basecamp, of course, we don't do those kinds of things. Some companies will shuttle people to and from work, which you could say is a good thing, but it's not a good thing if the shuttle schedule is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Like, that's 12 hours, So you got to look at those things. So all of our benefits are designed for, like, increasing vacation, paying for people's actual vacations, not just vacation time, sending them on vacations on our dime, 30-day paid sabbaticals every 3 years, fresh fruit and vegetables at home versus having, like, a big snack thing at the office. Instead, we send people food at home for them and their families, those kinds of things. I think that pays a lot. That pays off a lot in terms of achieving a calm company versus the alternative, which is, like, keep people alive. It's like, for example, in our industry, there's a lot of talk about, like, having masseuses or getting a massage at the office. And it's like, it's not relaxing if you're working and you go get a 15-minute chair massage and then you have to come right back and hunch over your keyboard again. Like, that's not actually a relaxing moment. Like, so we have a massage benefit, essentially, or a wellness benefit that's, like, outside the office. Like, truly go home or leave or do this on a weekend or whatever when you really want to relax, not, like, take a 15-minute break. That's just not really a true relaxation. It's like faux relaxation. That doesn't make sense to us.
Yeah. And on that point, I mean, Basecamp, you guys work 40-hour work week, and in the summer it's just a 32-hour work week, which aligns quite well with that, because obviously you're looking to get people out of the office. You're looking to create conditions where people can get into flow, can crank out high quality work in, and enough of it in, say, 4 to 5 hours, to the point where they don't feel rushed. So having them go out of the office, whether it's to visit a masseuse or go to the gym or whatever the case may be, is obviously well aligned with your philosophies. Whereas in other organizations where they do rock these, 12-hour days because they feel like they need to do them to get over the line, because of some of the various attributes that we've discussed, then you want to keep people in the office. So I imagine it would be much harder for, say, some of the organizations I've spoken about, like your Ernst & Youngs of the world, where people are in what you call a presence prison, and they feel they need to be in the office until 9 p.m. in the evening to really push for, hey, go out of the office. It's all good. Come back in a couple of hours once you're rested.
Yeah. It's challenging. The thing is that the reason it's not true that if you just stay at the office longer, you're going to get more work done. This is the thing that I think people just miss. Because again, if the office itself is not a productive place, and for many people it's not, then you're just there being busy again. And if you ask people, like, if you really need to get something done for work, where would you go? Very few people would say the office.
Yeah.
Or if they did, they'd say the office at like 6 a.m. or like 9 p.m. when no one's around, because they know that the office is not actually a place to go do the work. I mean, it has to be. Or you end up doing it at home or on the weekends, which you don't want to be. But offices typically aren't really designed that well for actually getting work done, because they're loud, they're noisy. There are a lot of open office plans these days, which was kind of the hot thing, and it's still very prevalent. It's also very cheap for landlords and for business owners to do, which is why they end up doing it. But it's not really conductive or conducive for real, good, solid flow state style work. Now, I understand not every job requires that necessarily, but a lot of the jobs in our industry certainly do. Creative jobs, programmers, writers, people who have to really think creatively about the work that they're doing, including customer service, where you really have to think about what it's like to be that customer on the other end, and think about them, put yourself in their shoes, understand what they're going through. Like, you can't be, there can't be constant clutter and chatter and noise around you. Otherwise, you're not going to have a chance to think. And I think part of it too is if you actually ask people, when's the last time you simply had time to think at work? I'm not even putting a number of hours on it. I'm not saying like 5 hours. I'm just saying like to really like sit down and think. Most people would say I haven't had a chance to actually do that in quite a long time. And I think that's really unfortunate.
Yeah, so on where work gets done, Jason, you've mentioned earlier that you've got people working across 35 cities. Now, I imagine using Basecamp would go a long way to facilitating outcomes with a distributed team. But, I mean, how have you managed to navigate some of the challenges associated with having people work all over the world?
You mean how to work remotely, essentially?
Mm-hmm.
We kind of grew up with it, basically. In that we, I'm trying to think, it was our fourth hire, basically, was my business, turned out to be ultimately my business partner, a guy named David Hannemeyer Hansen, right? And David lived in Copenhagen. And we were, I think, 7 time zones apart at the time. And we just figured out how to work together that way. There was no choice. It wasn't like we had a choice. It was just like, I liked him. We worked together well. We communicated well. Let's work on a project together. It turned out it worked out pretty well. And then our next hire was a guy in Utah, which was another, couple of time zones away from me. David was still in Copenhagen at the time. Eventually he came to Chicago, but now he lives in California, so we're apart again. And we just sort of grew up that way. I think it is difficult if you have a local company and all your practices and procedures and processes and stuff are all built up on getting people in the same room together. It's difficult then to make that first remote hire or even imagine that people could work remotely. But when you grow up that way, and that's the only way you've known how to really work, it's second nature. It becomes really natural. I mean, you and I are having I don't know how far apart we actually are right now, quite far. I
Quite
imagine.
far.
Yeah. So
A couple of flights, probably about 20 hours worth of flying, but
so I don't know how many miles that is or kilometers, but it's a long way, right? But we're able to talk, and like we can work on a project together right now. Like we are, in fact, we're having a conversation about something or recording a podcast. Like, some people would think that I've been on podcasts, for example, where they have to fly in and record you locally, and I'm like, why? Why can't we just use Skype? And they just they can't fathom that you could do something like this, or they'd say the quality isn't as good, and I'd say it's certainly good enough. Like it's really quite good, in fact, these days. So there's a lot of, I think, myths and tales people tell themselves about how you couldn't possibly do something like this remotely, but I absolutely believe you can, and we've shown that to be true, and a lot of companies are showing that it's totally possible.
Yeah, and then you also take into account the opportunity cost of, for example, taking your podcast hypothetical. For me to fly over to Chicago, it's going to take up 20 hours of my time just getting there, then flying back and being disconnected from the web and not being able to do a bunch of work that I could have otherwise done. the cost of doing that is phenomenal. But this is something that maybe doesn't show up as much in smaller organizations, but in your large, say, S&P 200 companies, this happens all the time where people are just getting flown all over the country for 1 hour meetings when they could just get on a freaking FaceTime call if they really had to and have that conversation.
I know. It's super wasteful. Now, I'm not someone who's going to say FaceTime or true FaceTime, face-to-face time isn't
of course.
valuable. Of course it is, right? Of course it is. And occasionally it's really valuable, and occasionally there is no substitute for it. But all the time, in fact, I think it's actually quite worse. All the time means it's really easy to distract each other. It's really easy to pull people into meetings that don't need to happen. It's really easy to tap someone on the shoulder and pull them away from their work. When everyone's very close to each other, it's really easy to interrupt each other. It just is. And I think that at some point, it's really important to give people plenty of space, and having a actually physical space between people, and not necessarily an office space, but physical distance. It puts people in the position of actually having a lot more time to themselves to do their work. And so what we found was that, when David actually ended up moving to Chicago and we started working in the same office together, we got less work done because it's so easy just to bother each other, and then when he moved away, we ended up getting more work done again. And you just see the truth is, it's when you're far apart, but you have a few hours of overlap, that's great, because then you can go high bandwidth when you need to for a few hours. But for the most part, most of your day should not be in that high bandwidth type of communication. It should be very, very solitary in a sense. I don't mean isolated, but you should be able to focus without worrying about someone coming and tapping you on the shoulder or pulling you into something you don't need to be involved with.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the peril of a lot of these open plan offices that, look cool on the surface, but in terms of getting into the flow state and getting some real work done, they sabotage a lot of organizations' sort of productivity in many ways. And now they're kind of reverting back to what they had before and setting up all these little private offices along the perimeter of these buildings so people can actually get some privacy.
Yes, totally. So, yeah, I agree. Absolutely agree.
So, Jason, your book is split up into several sections, namely Defend Your Time, Culture, Process. I wanted to just explore Defend Your Time and unpack some of the techniques that you practice at Basecamp to defend your time. You've talked about things like calendar Tetris, saying no. What are some of the other things you do to defend your time?
Well, yeah, one of the key things is this idea that at Basecamp, we cannot see each other's calendars, which is rare in the business world. Most companies have shared calendars, right? And you can go and request a meeting or get on someone's calendar or whatever. You cannot get on my calendar. I cannot get on yours because you can't see mine and I can't see yours. And that's intentional. I don't want it to be easy to take other people's time. And when you have a calendar that you can see and basically people's time is just broken up by slots, it's really easy to just click on the screen, take an hour, send a meeting request. Yeah, technically they can deny it, but very few people do. And all of a sudden, you've just taken an hour of someone's time. At Basecamp, if you want to talk to someone or have a meeting with someone or whatever, you have to go ask them. You have to ask them for their time. You say, hey, Jonas, hey, Bill, whatever, hey, Sam, hey, Lauren, are you free at 3:00 on Wednesday? I would like to go over something with you. It's an ask, and then they're the responder is in control. They're like, well, I don't have time, or I'm not free, or whatever. Versus you could say that a calendar could represent that, but it rarely does, because any free time you see, people can just snap it up. And then before you know it, your day is full. And I'd always ask people to look at their own calendar and say, how many of those things on your calendar did you put there? And how many things did other people put there? And if other people are putting things on your calendar, they're essentially taking your time away from you. And if they're taking your time away from you, what do you have? All you have is time to get your work done. So by not sharing calendars, we help each other protect each other's time and make it a little bit harder to get on someone's schedule, essentially. That's one way. Another way is, again, I talked about this a bit earlier, which is that culturally there is not an expectation of immediate response. It's different with customer service. We try to get back to customers within a few minutes, but we have a lot of people who are dedicated to that and that alone. So that's a different story. But internally, if someone has a question, like they'll write it up and they'll send it to you, and you get back to them when you're ready. If you don't get back to someone in 5 minutes, they're not going to then text you. They're not going to then IM you, and they're not going to then call you. Like, the expectation is they'll get back to me when they're ready. And if they haven't gotten back to me, it's because they're busy or something else that's more important to them. And they'll get back to me when they're ready. So that's another thing. It's more of a cultural thing. And then the tools we use, we don't use chat as a primary method of communication. I think chat, Slack, those kinds of things, they have their place, but they're terrible tools as the primary method of communication. I think most communication in an organization should be asynchronous, not real time. Real time turns everything into an ASAP moment, into the expectation of immediate response. It's too easy. I much prefer email style. We don't use email internally. We use Basecamp. Basecamp has it has chat, but also has a long form traditional message board, message forum style communication where you write something up and people get a notification and they can respond when they're ready in time, versus the expectation of like an immediate response like a text might be. So most things we communicate internally that way, and that frees up people's time because they don't feel the constant pull to be paying attention to a dozen real-time conversations at once.
And I imagine in that case, I mean, you talked about setting up meetings. Would people, rather than, I mean, you mentioned that they will actually go over and speak to the person, but in some cases, would it make more sense for them to just log a message on Basecamp so that they're not actually being interrupted if they are in flow? Yeah,
totally. And when I said like they would actually ask someone, I actually mean virtually. In most cases, they would write a message and it'd be like a human message. It'd be a question versus like a calendar invite through a system is so dehumanized. It's like, you get this invite through the system and it's like, yes, no, like those are your options basically, or maybe I think is sometimes another option versus like, hey, are you free at 3? The answer can be a lot of different things. It's not yes or no. It's like, well, it depends. Like, what do you have in mind? Like there's a bit of a negotiation then. I think that's it's a much friendlier human way to discuss, a moment versus yes, no, maybe,
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. And I guess now we're seeing the proliferation of a lot of calendar scheduling tools as well, like Ask Amy, Calendly.com, which does at least give you the liberty of saying, hey, I'm free between, say, 9 to 12 on Monday, Wednesday, Friday for meetings, and that's it. So here's my calendar. Schedule a time if you like. Here's a 15-minute slot so that they don't, by default, schedule 60 minutes, which seems to be the default in a lot of large organizations. And therefore, you have a little bit more control over your calendar as well, insofar as setting up meetings is concerned.
Yes, exactly. I'm with you on that completely.
Awesome. So Jason, I wanted to just double click on something you talk about in the process section of your book, which is commitment, not consensus. What's all that about?
Commitment, not consensus. So this is kind of an idea from Jeff Bezos, which is that he talked about this in one of his shareholder letters, which is we should not be out there trying to seek consensus on any decision. A lot of organizations are consensus driven and that they need to get a bunch of people around a table to agree on something before they're going to make progress on it or move forward on it. We just don't look at things that way. We want everyone around the table to put in their 2 cents, and you can debate it and discuss it, but at some point it's up to somebody to just make a decision, and then it's up to the other people to get on board. So you can disagree and commit. Basically, the idea is that you could make your voice heard, and a decision can be made, and then after that, you're expected to commit. You could say like I really disagree with the way we're going to do this, but I'm on board. I'm here to help you get this done, and I hope this is the best thing we've ever done. I hope that I'm wrong, essentially. Versus the amount of energy it takes to try to persuade, could be 10 people to agree with you. it's just not worth the effort to do that. The better thing is to have the debate, someone make a decision, and then everyone get in line, essentially, after that. The decision has to be explained, but that's the way we do it. And that's the way we go. Otherwise, like, you're just dragging and you're putting in so much energy, and it's a war of attrition until like people just end up giving up and agreeing. I just don't want people to give up and agree. I want people to feel like they put their word in and they made their case, and someone disagreed, and that's just the way it is. And now it's time to go. Yeah. Let's all get behind this.
Yeah. And one other thing Bezos talks about in his shareholder letters is this type 1 v type 2 decisions, with type 1 being reversible decisions and type 2 being irreversible decisions. And if it's reversible, just move forward, and if you make a mistake, you can fix that. The problem is in many organizations where we treat all decisions as irreversible. So we're always calling, say, a steering committee meeting and getting multiple heads on the bus, and it just slows us down to a T where we don't get anything done when we spend all our time in meetings.
Totally. I think that's a great point too. So yeah, it's those things that, you know, I do believe in a vigorous debate, and disagreement's always going to be there, and the whole thing. And but at some point, someone's got to make a call, and it's up to that person. And the way we do it internally is we have this idea on every project we're working on, where there's what we call a point person. We don't have project managers, so our teams are small. We always have 3 or fewer people typically working on something, and one of those people at the beginning of the project is assigned the point. And everybody in the team knows that they're the point person, and the point person, their job is to make decisions. They have the final say, and people can argue with them, people can debate with them, whatever. But at the end of the day, they're the ones who are they're the ones who are on the point to make the final call. And then it's the rest of the team understands that if that person's made the call, then that's the direction we're going in, versus this endless infighting or the amount of effort it takes to get everyone aligned, when you don't really need to get everyone aligned. You just need everyone to understand why a decision was made, and then we move forward. You win some and you lose some, and that's just like the way it goes, versus trying to win them all. It's unreasonable, and the amount of effort expended is just not worth it.
Yeah, and I think it's also about people rallying around the decision once it's been made, regardless of whether or not they were advocates of it or not previously. But once that decision is made, hey, we're going to be way more likely of having a positive outcome if everybody rallies around it and is aligned.
Agreed.
So Jason, real quick question. I imagine you have turned off notifications across your phone and your desktop.
Yeah, I don't have notifications on my desktop at all. Like desktop, like the ones that come in from the side, like those. Yeah, I don't have any of those. Yeah. On my phone, I'm pretty much almost always in do not disturb mode. I have a few people that I let through, like for emergency, it's kind of the emergency list where it's not really an emergency, but like my wife will get through and things like that if I need to talk to her during the day, that sort of thing. But other than that, I'm not notifications driven. I don't want to be pulled into things. I will check things when I'm ready to check things. And if something is a huge, massive, urgent emergency, like I will hear about it some other way. So yeah, I'm not like constantly trying to chase the dot. Essentially, is what you could say. People who are notifications driven, always looking at that red dot and trying to get to that sort of thing. Yep.
Or responding to a Pavlov's bell.
Yep.
So Jason, look, we are almost out of time, but it's time for our 3-question lightning round. You've left our audience with a hell of a lot of value bombs on the topic of getting more shit done at work, and I'll add links to the book in the show notes for our listeners. But question number 1, I'm not sure how this will fly given that you've been running Basecamp for 19 years, but you can just tell me that the answer is Basecamp if you like. But if you could work for any other organization at any stage of the company lifecycle, Jason, who would it be and why?
That's a great question. I would probably want to work for I've got 2 thoughts, actually, if you don't mind. I've never worked for an extremely large company. I really have zero desire to do so, but I am curious about what it's like.
I think it'd last 3 months, Jason.
maybe. But I'm sort of curious. And then the other thing is like a really, really, really small business that knows every single one of its customers. One of the things that is unfortunate about our business is that we have over 100,000 customers who pay us. And there's no way for me to know them all. But I have a friend of mine who owns a small grocery store down the street from where I live. And, a customer walks in the door, he can go, "Hey, Jim. Hey, Bill. Hey, Lisa." Like he knows his customers. And I think it'd be really cool to be in a business that actually knows every single one of their customers by first name. I think that would be cool. I don't know what business that would be. It doesn't even matter to me. But like conceptually, I think that'd be a really neat place to be.
Yeah, I think it would also improve the wellness and general happiness levels of people. I mean, relationships are a big part of happiness. And if you have that relationship with your customers and you're actually creating value in their lives, I mean, it can only be a net good.
Agreed.
So question number 2, Jason, is if you could ask anyone a question, dead or alive, who would it be and what would you ask?
Man, how about this? Can I change the question a little bit?
I don't know. This has never been done before. Go for it, mate.
I'd like to watch someone work versus ask someone a question. I would like to watch probably Nikola Tesla. I've always been fascinated by him. I would just love to be able to watch him work on something, just to see. I've always been fascinated with watching people work and how they approach problems and how they think about things and how they do stuff. So for me, the question would be a silent question, essentially. I would just observe. I'd love to observe. So maybe the question would be, could I watch you work for a day? Like that would probably be the question.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I imagine this wouldn't be during his latter days when he was basically holed up in a little apartment surrounded by countless doves.
Yeah. No.
Probably not. Like your last question, Jason, and it more or less builds upon a lot of the stuff that we've discussed today, but do you have any sort of daily practices, rituals, routines that help you firing on all cylinders?
Sleep really is the most important one. I'm very become extremely careful and protective about my sleep, which is why I have to go to bed early because my kid gets up early and he gets me up in the morning. So sleep is number one. I'm very careful about eating and exercise. If I don't exercise, not every day, I'm usually 3 to 4 times a week, I get really good workouts in. That's enough for me. But if I don't, I'm not good. I get a little bit jittery. I don't feel right. So that's important to me. But it's not about a particular routine either. Like I can go for a long walk. I can go for a run. I can ride on the bike for a bit. I can lift weights. It's not a, dictated routine, but I just need to do something. I need to move. I need to move around. Otherwise I don't function as well.
Yeah, 100%. I find if I skip more than 1 day or if I skip more than 2 days, definitely like my mental state, just everything just feels sluggish and I'm just generally not a nice person. Not as nice as I normally am, particularly going into the office. So getting that workout out of the way in the morning just changes my perspective of the day. And also I think there's something to be said about the discipline piece. Like, I don't know about when you train, Jason, but I find if I get up at say 5:30, 6 in the morning, whatever it is, and smash out even a 30-minute workout, then that sort of overcoming that hump, that adversity, that voice in your head that says, hey, just go back to bed. You've kind of conquered that and you take that attitude with you throughout the rest of your day.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome, Jason. Well, thank you so much. You've been an awesome guest. Our audience can pick up a copy of your book on Amazon as well as your previous book, Recode. They can find out more about Basecamp at basecamp.com. Hit you up on Twitter at Jason Fried. Watch your TED Talk on why work doesn't happen at work from 2010 over at TED.com. And follow your blog on Medium at Jason Fried. Have I covered all the bases there?
We're all good, man. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Hi, guys. Steve again. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to receive a weekly email from me, complete with reflections, books I've been reading, words of wisdom, and access to blogs, ebooks, and more that I'm publishing on a regular basis, just leave your details at futuresquared.xyz/subscribe and you'll receive the very next one. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, take a minute to like, share, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. It goes a long way to giving the podcast the exposure it needs so I can continue bringing you guests and conversations of the highest caliber. You can catch me on Twitter at Steve Glibeski and on Instagram at TheSteveGlibeski. Until next time.
Hasta la vista, baby.